Well, hello and welcome to Outdoor Oklahoma. I'm Todd Craighead. In 2021, the ODWC began a lengthy process to modernize our brand and make it more relevant to who we are and what we do. And now that the design phase is done, we've began the process of incorporating the new look out in the field. Today, biologists are installing the very first sign in the state with the new brand elements. And as signs naturally age out, they'll eventually all be updated statewide with the new look. A wildlife department that understands the importance of relevancy and staying connected to those who enjoy our state's natural resources. Just another reason to love Oklahoma and the adventures that await you.
Hi, I'm Mikel Donahue. We're here in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and this is my studio and the place where I work every day and try to create some good art. If you want to come this way, we'll get there and take you upstairs. 2009, I kind of retired, but I'll say quit what I was doing after 33 years. And you know, it's something I've always been interested in, but not taken anything serious. My dad's grandfather had a raised cattle and grew wheat in north central Oklahoma in Grant County. And he was actually a real life cowboy in his younger days. So I was exposed to horses and cattle through him, but at the same time on my mother's father, who painted, I got exposed to the art and the Western art. But then Dad liked to hunt, so that got me involved in the outdoors and hunting for quail and deer and things like that. So you get exposed to the outdoors as well and the wildlife. And I think it was just kind of a natural evolution of sorts that kind of drew it to me. Last year, I entered both the Oklahoma duckstamp competition as well as the Iowa DU competition, and was selected as the winner for the Iowa stamp. That was I did a wood duck drake, which I thought was a little ambitious at the time, but it turned out to be a good subject and designed out very well. So I was very grateful for that as well. Very surprised that I won that. I got the news on that first, and then shortly thereafter, probably 3 or 4 weeks, I got the call about the winning the Oklahoma duck stamp. The competition gives an artist the outlet to do something creative with a subject in a very minimal way. When you consider the size and the challenge to do something that will be reproduced at the size the stamp is, it's very challenging to come up with a design or some kind of composition that will hold up well at that reduced size. But at the same time, you have to go out in the field. You have to do your observations and get your photography and your reference materials, as well as looking at either skins or mounts and trying to find things that will give you that detail that you don't find in a photo. As with anything, the devil is in the details, and the details and the accuracy are what make the image. You do have to accept what is and what isn't popular or being accepted and consider all those things. There's an emotional aspect to art that I feel when I'm doing it, and at some point the viewer has an emotional contact with that, whether it's the same thing I felt or not, or think about when I see it, I don't know, but hopefully it does convey some sort of reaction. I think the most beneficial thing someone could tell another person if they want to do art, whether it's music or painting or whatever, is just do it and get immersed in it as much as you can, learn as much as you can, study as much as you can. If you're doing subjects, whether it's rocks and trees or animals, wildlife, know your subject. If somebody sees my art, I hope they will look at it and see that it's done right, that they can look and say, he got it right. He knows that bird, he knows that attitude, he knows what's going on with that time, that place, that moment.
Falconry dates back at least 4,000 years. It was from the Far East, basically, and it moved into Europe during the Crusades. It was a very popular sport and pastime during the Middle Ages in Europe. And there was a whole hierarchy in terms of what birds people could own or have, depending on what your rank and status in society. In the United States, falconry has become I'll say very popular with 4,000 falconers, but it's become quite a bit more popular over the last 20 or 30 years.
It's one of the most unique sports we have in Oklahoma and really any place in the world. It's a very ancient sport, and it's a sport where people use live trained raptors, falcons, hawks to actually hunt game.
You know, it was an interest, the thing that inspired me and that caused me to get into falconry is just an interest in wildlife. And it actually drove me to go out and become to get a degree in biology. And a lot of the falconers actually become biologists as a result of the falconry. It's an interest in watching that predator-prey relationship. It's more than just the hunting. It's because you get an opportunity to really see the hawks predator-prey thing going on a regular basis.
I was always interested in falconry when I was real young. Didn't know there was anything about it. You know, we didn't have the website, computers at that time, and it wasn't on the web, and it wasn't put out in the public as much as what it is now. So it was harder to get into it. And they had a big meet in November called the North American Falconers Association back in the early 90s. And just happened to be in Woodward at that time where I grew up. And next thing I know, you know, somebody's telling me, oh, there's all these falcons out at the hotel, you ought to go out and see them. And so I went out there and I was like, oh my God, you know, they had all these birds out in the weathering yard staked out, and I got hooked up with some of the people and actually found out that there were state clubs and there were other crazy people like me that were doing this, and it just rent me from that time on. I sought it out and got into it and have had birds ever since.
I got into it, I went out with a friend who was a falconer, went on a hunting trip with him and kind of just fell in love with it from the first time I went. Another thing that really attracted me to the sport was I can hunt close to my home. I don't have to have a lease or drive way out of the city to go hunt. As long as I got the space to do it, since I'm not discharging a firearm or anything. I can hunt kind of wherever I want to as long as I get landowner permission, and it's something my kids can do with me because I don't need to sit in a deer blind and tell them to be quiet the whole time. I want them to walk around and make noise and scare up game for my bird to chase after, and my kids really enjoy it also. They have fun working with the birds with me.
From 19 years ago, most of the people were flying hawks and a lot less people are flying large falcons like this one I've got here. Because of captive breeding and because things like peregrine falcons have come off the endangered species list, and they're actually available to be trapped in the wild, large falcons are much more popular than they used to be 20 or 30 years ago. And so what we're seeing now is kind of a resurgence of people flying large long wings, everything from gyr falcons and peregrines to hybrid falcons like this one and prairie falcons.
I became an apprentice just because I've been doing this for so long. It's a great way that I could go out, hang out with my dad. I got to go places, meet so many great people. And I just like going out, you know, having some fun. This is a really great sport. Flying the birds is a really fun aspect of it. You know, you just have a great time doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that you're going to be immediately gratified with. It's something that is going to take a long time. You're going to have to prepare for it, build facilities, get inspected, but it's ultimately rewarding whenever you see the birds actually up close and doing what they do.
It's a slow-growing sport in that it's a high time sport. It takes a lot of time to participate in falconry. It's not like some other field sports where you might be able to simply put the shotgun aside for the season. We usually work with the birds daily, year-round, at some level.
Y'all should have got here a little earlier and you could have went out and hunted with us. Yeah. Yeah, we're just getting back from the field, exercising the birds. I'm gonna put them back out so they can catch some sun and take a bath and get ready for tomorrow. So want to come on back and we'll show you our facilities.
It's an old sport. You do it like no other sport. You got birds and you're not using firearms. You hunt longer than you can with firearms. The action's cooler than, you know, sitting there in a deer stand or walking around through a field with a shotgun. You just have a great time, in my opinion, than doing that kind of thing.
Well, falconry is a very difficult sport. We only have about 100 falconers in Oklahoma, so you can tell from that how difficult it is to become one. It's a real challenge because there are hurdles you have to cross. You have to take an exam, you have to build facilities, as well as find a licensed falconer that's your sponsor. And it's only the really diehards that want to go through that procedure, but it's really tough because you're dealing with live birds and you're actually hunting with live birds, and some of them aren't that common in the wild, so it has to be fairly restrictive to protect the birds themselves.
Every day we will weigh the birds to kind of keep on top of them, see if they're ready to go out and hunt, or even just health-wise through the year, check them out. As you get into falconry, you think, oh, that looks like fun, and I could get a bird and go out and do this. Then they get into it and they realize how much of a commitment that it is. It's a daily thing. You've got to, you know, you're getting up and you go check the bird in the morning and make sure everything's good. If you come home from lunch, you're out checking on it. When you get home at night, you're out checking on it because you get hooked on it and they're part of your life. They're like a kid, and they're more time consuming than what a dog is, because you can't just take the dog or the bird to the vet and put it up for the weekend while you go out of town. You have to be another licensed falconer that can care for the bird to be able to handle it and watch it for somebody else. Plus you've got to have you're only allotted so many birds for your license, and you know, if you're overloaded on birds, you can't watch one for somebody else because you don't have an open slot. So it is regulated. There are time restraints there that, you know, it's not just something that you can get into for a week or so and then not do it anymore. Especially if you've went and bought a bird and then you've got this bird, you just can't give it to anybody. So it's not for everybody, but if you're willing to make the sacrifice and you really enjoy it, then falconry is something that you'd probably want to get into. It's kind of it's always been my release. Go out in the field, fly the birds, hunt with them, and use your dog also. And if you've been working all day and you sneak out and go at the end of the day and go fly the birds, you get back home and you're all relaxed. It's like a nice little workout, and you've been out sucking some nice fresh air in. So it's a good release.
You know, basically we're a pretty low impact sport. In a lot of ways I like to think of falconry as being a kind of a green hunting sport. It's kind of the equivalent to hunting of what fly fishing is to fishing, in that it's about as difficult of a way as possible to try to catch something.
For outdoor fun, there's nothing like fishing for bass from a canoe. You know, it seems that some folks just naturally prefer a canoe to any other kind of boat. However, the canoe is not the safest boat in the world. In fact, in the hands of a novice, it is one of the most dangerous. A bit of carelessness or a strong gust of wind can upset a canoe almost as quickly as a bass can make a strike. And because of this, some of the larger lakes forbid the use of canoes. So these fishermen have chosen as their fishing hole a 5-acre pond where largemouth bass can be caught. Selection of bait is important. Our fishermen decide to try the well-known hula dancer. And this is the fish-eye view of the plug as it skims across the top of the water. This pond is one of many that has been stocked by the State Game and Fish Department to provide better fishing in Oklahoma. It is a shining example of how small lakes, 8 to 12 feet deep and covering 3 or more acres of surface area, can produce excellent black bass fishing, whereas smaller lakes or ponds must be expensively managed and seldom afford good fishing. There's another stripe, and this one looks like a whopper. It's going to take both of our fishermen to land this old fighter. That's the reason bass fishing is so much fun. Bass give you a real workout, as well as some anxious moments. Well, our canoe fishermen have really been pulling them in. Just look at that stringer. Real beauties, aren't they?
In western Oklahoma, wildlife biologists continue to tackle the challenge of keeping the landscape wildlife friendly. Historically, western Oklahoma's grasslands and prairies were managed through natural fires caused by lightning storms and sometimes campfires. And it's easy to see how a fire could happen out here on the arid, windy plains, with a yearly rainfall in some areas almost reaching 17 inches. It's just dry. So what's a wildlife department biologist's main frustration? The water-greedy Juniperus virginiana, known as the eastern red cedar. These trees rapidly seed and, without fire, quickly encroach riparian zones and choke out valuable wildlife habitat. In order to combat cedars, biologists and concerned landowners started reintroducing fire through prescribed burn plans. These fires, which are closely watched and heavily managed, are a really useful conservation tool. But fires sometimes are not enough, and a more direct approach is needed. And that approach is called mastication. Marcus Thibodeau, the biologist for Black Kettle, Pack Saddle, and Ellis County WMAs, has seen quick results from this inexpensive management technique.
So this is an example of one of our active riparian enhancement projects we've got going on. So this was a riparian area that was identified as being too choked out or encroached by cedar trees and other undesirable woody vegetation to where turkeys would avoid it or not utilize it. So after working through that process with the NWTF and even some of our partners at like the U.S. Forest Service, like at Black Kettle, we've hired some contractors to come in and open up these roost tree sites. So what they do is they masticate all of the eastern red cedars and undesirable woody vegetation. So mastication literally means to chew up. So they have mulching heads on these heavy pieces of equipment like the one running behind me that come through and chew up all the undesirable woody vegetation and leave it clean. So historically this would have been done by fire, but since that's been suppressed, happening naturally, this stuff has become way overgrown, and with the invasive eastern red cedar really just choked out the turkeys from being able to use this area. And so we bring this equipment in and they bring it back down to this manageable level so that in the future we can come through here and control it with fire. We see turkeys responding to this habitat work immediately. Even with these big machines running, we'll see turkeys start to filter into these areas and make it home. And all of this is paid for by the turkey hunters of Oklahoma and the National Wild Turkey Federation. We also do cooperative projects with the U.S. Forest Service. So we just want to thank and acknowledge all of our partners in making this turkey habitat great again for our in-state and out-of-state hunters that come out here.
Well, we hope today's stories remind you that Oklahoma is a perfect place to explore. So however you choose to enjoy our state's incredible natural world, remember, your adventure starts with Outdoor Oklahoma. Outdoor Oklahoma is produced by the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation and is proud to serve and be funded entirely by sportsmen and women and outdoor enthusiasts who love and appreciate all things wild in the great state of Oklahoma.